to let you know all. Is it okay, all of you?
So, ma'am, you are saying that recordings will be available there?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
They keep uploading the sessions recordings, and
Okay.
so you can. Malini was saying something.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Just a
afternoon.
clarification. You were also going to tell us the number of words, and you were also going to tell us there's some confusion. I mean, I didn't have a confusion, but people were a bit confused about which assignment we have to submit. Did you get any clarification on that?
Okay, what they told me is regarding once you are there in your own, web page, your own page, your own account, all the
Yeah.
instructions are there. All the instructions are there.
No,
So
the
what
number of words is not there.
number of words is not mentioned?
No. They do
Okay,
mention very clearly that you should not exceed the number of words, but they do
okay.
not tell you what the number of words are.
I think that should be more than enough. If they have given a limit not to exceed, may I know just know how much of word limit they have asked you not to
No, they have
exceed?
not given a limit. That's what I mean. They have not given a limit. In the
Okay.
instructions, they say the questions will tell you how many words should be used, but then they don't actually say it in the question.
Okay, okay. So because the problem here is I am not able to, have a look at your account. So I'm not able to really give any, instructions to that. But okay,
Yeah.
for regarding the word limit and all, let me just again get back to you.
Yeah. I've actually gone through to the Mr. Rajesh, who's the program coordinator, but
Okay,
I haven't heard back from him.
okay, okay. Let me just give this information again tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's begin. So today we are going to start with block 5. Just to refresh your memory, all of your memory, we started with block 1. It was Henry Fielding, Tom Jones. We had block 2, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. Block 3, Wuthering Heights. Block 4, Charles Dickens, Great Expectations. And today we are here with block 5, George Eliot, Middlemarch. So block 5, Middlemarch, again has 5 units, and we will be discussing in a very comprehensive manner. And good that you will be receiving the recording. So again, I'll try to be as slow as possible so that you can catch hold of the words easily. And a sincere request to all my students here, please always have a notebook and a pen. Note down whatever sounds really catchy or appealing, and you can definitely use those words or phrases in your answer. So that would be a great help to all of you to make notes as well. So let's start. This is block 5, George Eliot, Middlemarch, and we'll start with unit 1. And the unit 1 says approaching the novel. So basically here we will come to know what is the background of the novel and how we need to understand the novel. So the novel is divided into 6 parts. uh, One by one we will discuss each of these parts, and every part or every section has some kind of a revelation. So let us understand that. And just to remind again to all of you, or all anyone who has any questions or anything, may please put the questions in the chat section, and in the when we have a break or maybe towards the end, we can discuss. Yeah, Malini, important thing you need to ask? Anything important? Malini, you raised hands. Okay, okay. So let's begin. So this is part 1 or section 1, and approaching the novel. Here we get a background information of the novel. So this is a town which is called as Middlemarch, and it's a very quiet provincial town. A very quiet provincial town of Middlemarch, and there is this young woman, the main character, who is Dorothea Brooke, and she is almost in the precipice of adulthood. So she is an orphan, but she is affluent, she is wealthy. However, Dorothea, as a princess, is not that conventional as we regularly see the heiress to be. So she does not need luxury. She does not, um, want this kind of lifestyle or a status that she holds herself or the society has approved herself to. Rather, she admires something which gives meaning to her life. She admires architecture, and she wants to do something good for the society, and she would always want to devote herself to do something noble. So this is the kind of personality Dorothea is. Her beauty and sincerity are enchanting and definitely striking. However, her desires are not driven by anything but spiritual yearning for meaning. So she longs for something which is very severe, which is totally spiritually inclined, and she always looks for meaning in her life and not pleasure. So meaning is her ultimate longing. And she lives with her sister, and she is Celia. In a way, she's a very light-hearted girl, and she's under the guardianship. Both of them, both the sisters, are under the guardianship of their uncle, Mr. Brooke, and he is a very clumsy landowner. So Dorothea's quest for meaning or purpose in her life leads her not towards youthful romance, but into the orbit of somebody called Edward Casaubon. Edward Casaubon is another a character here, and we know Edward Casaubon as somebody who is a very dry, isolated clergyman, and he's almost 30 years her senior. So look at the contrast here, and like we know that Victorian novels always focus on the realities of life of common people. Look at the idea here that Eliot is trying to present. She is somebody, Dorothea Brooke is somebody who is looking for meaning and not pleasure. Luxury means nothing to her. There is no space of romance in her life. However, she gets married to somebody who is absolutely her opposite, absolutely her extreme, who is a dry clergyman, and again 30 years her senior, who is into everything but spiritual inclination. So this is the extreme that Eliot is presenting. So Edward Casaubon is working on a monumental project, and that project's name is The Key to All Mythologies. It's a vast synthesis of ancient knowledge. Now, what Dorothea sees here is she imagines herself that, okay, if I find a person who is working on a project like this, something to deal with mythology, so definitely I will get somebody as a spiritual companion, and I will have an intellect person alongside. So this is the reason, this is the only reason she agrees to marry him. And there were a lot of disapproval, there was a lot of bewilderment among her family and friends. But since we know Dorothea as somebody who is so inclined towards spirituality, inclined towards finding meaning in her life, and she believed that since somebody is working on a project which is dealing with mythology, with this condition, she thought that maybe I would have a best companion for marriage. So she agrees to marry. This is on part section one of the book. When we move to section two, we come to know that Dorothea's marriage is absolutely a disappointment, and she's not able to uh, fulfill the expectations of the societal institution, that is marriage. She's not able to do that, and she finds Kasabon, her husband, everything but a sage. He's far from being a sage. He is emotionally remote, he is insecure, he is possessive, and this great project that he's working is revealed to be completely outdated and directionless. And this person lacks vigor, he has no real scholarship. So everything Dorothea thought previously, that Casaubon, and that inspired her to marry him, that this person might be of an intellectual spirit, but no, this person absolutely has no vigor or direction on how to move ahead with this project. And what's worse, he resents Dorothea's intelligence. He does not like the way Dorothea looks herself as a person, or finds herself as a person. He does not like it. He disdains it. He resents it, and he does not really encourage Dorothea to follow something like spirituality, and he does not really encourage the intelligence she has. And the problem here, what in subtle words, what Eliot wants to convey here is, when a partner, uh, especially the male partners, when they find that the woman partner is definitely a point where at a point where she's inspiring others, where she's completely different from the rest of the world, where she is completely in a different direction and for good, this particular trait is barely acknowledged or even applauded. They find it as a threat. So the same thing happens here in Casaubon. Casaubon feels that Dorothea and her intelligence and her scope towards finding meaning or purpose in her life is absolutely a threat, and he does not find any partnership. However, Dorothea's intentions were completely that she would find a partner, a team in her husband. So this was clearly absent. Here, George Eliot paints Dorothea's inner world with sensitivity, incredible sensitivity. The idealism that once she thought was kind of a thrilling now begins to feel like a trap. She feels that there is no way out. She is disappointed. She's disheartened. She's almost on the verge of giving up, and she is completely bewildered. Her earning for purpose is not met, and her husband completely stays away from her, and the husband's esteem is not likely to be seen in the way she thought to be. So basically, she also had the same kind of an illusion which she had in her mind before marriage. I use the word same kind of illusion just to take you back to Pip's idea of illusion that discussed yesterday. So this is the same kind of illusion she had for Casaubon. And meanwhile, what is Casaubon doing at Casaubon's estate? There is a new character who enters, and his name is Lowick. He's a new figure, and he is Casaubon's young cousin. And he's also known as Will Ladislaw. Lowick is also known as Will Ladislaw, and he is the young cousin of Casaubon. Will is everything Casaubon is not. And look at the contrast where Eliot is presenting. Will is everything Casaubon is not. He is warm, he is passionate, he is artistic, he is unconventional, and as in how he meets Dorothea, he recognizes the beautiful mind and the beauty, the real beauty of Dorothea. And though neither of them dare acknowledge it, but there is a deep and strong emotional undercurrent between the two that begins to stir gradually. So then we go to the next part of the novel, the third part, where we see that what's happening parallelly with Dorothea's tale. Parallelly to Dorothea's tale, George Eliot introduces another newcomer to Middlemarch. This is another character, and he is Dr. Tertius Lydgate. He's Dr. Tertius Lydgate. He is a young, idealistic physician and who has a dream to um, bring some kind of a reformation in the scientific field, and he wants to really work into the modern medicine. So he's trained in Paris, and he's full of ideas, he's full of innovation. And this character, Tertius Lidgett, seeks to revolutionize the healthcare province in Middlemarch, and he wanted to start a new hospital, which is funded by another character who is called as Mr. Bulstrode. So there's a banker who is he's funding for the new hospital that this new character, Dr. Tertius Lidgett, wants to open. Lidgett is a reformer by spirit, and he is resistant to change. He's arrogant while tempered by a little bit of idealism, and he completely ignores the already existing doctors. So still he finds a little bit of friends around him, which includes another character and who is very kind. His name is Fair Brother. And there is this another brilliant friend he finds, the Garth family, in the Garth family. But Lidgett's world is soon entangled with Rosamund Vincy. So Lidgett is completely attracted towards this woman, Rosamund Vincy, the town beauty. She is accomplished, she is ambitious, she is raised to expect. She's raised in a way that anybody in an elegant life would expect to be raised. And Rosamund sees in Lidgett an escape from her provincial roots and a path to success. And he sees in her refinement, beauty, and rest. And then finally, Lidgett and Rosamund, they marry. However, again, there is a mismatch which is soon evident. Lidgett's career is completely beset by debts. There is social politics involved. And here, Rosamond, who is a town beauty, of course, because she is accomplished, she is ambitious, and she's so full of vanity. So she cannot match up with the expectation of Rosamond. And he struggles between the scientific integrity and the kind of pressure that he is receiving in his marital survival. Then the novel moves to the next section, section 4, and this as the novel progresses, the town itself is considered or is seen to be a living organism. And why a living organism? Because each of the characters presented in the novel and their decision is affecting others lifestyle. So all of them are connected, closely connected, and this becomes like a social web. And George Eliot is an expert in drawing a web like this. He builds in his novel uh, class, gender, he brings in morality, he brings economics, religion, and he tries his best through situation and contexts and characters and giving life to the plot. He tries to intersect all of these, and in some way or the other, whatever each person does, each character does, either hampers or helps the other character in the entire novel. So the banker, Mr. Bulstrode, uh, who is helping Lidgett to open a hospital, who is funding. He's a very pious banker. He has a dark past. There is a lot of money lending, and there is a mysterious inheritance which is linked to Will Ladislaw. So this secret, when this secret is exposed by the vengeful Raffles, Raffles is another person character. Bulstrode public image collapses, and then again his integrity is doubted. So Rosamund, meanwhile, proves incapable of understanding Lidgett's struggle. Rosamund is only bothered about the kind of vanity she carries, and she's not able to understand the struggle that Lidgett is going through. And she lies to him. She retreats herself into self pity. She damages his plans, and their marriage is nothing but tragedy. Their marriage is nothing but misunderstanding. And all the intellectual dreams that Lidget had, they are all crushed by this domestic illusion. In the next section, we see when we get back to Casaubon's health. We get back to Casaubon's health, and here we see that Casaubon's health is not really well. It is declining, and he still attempts to control Dorothea, even beyond the grave, okay, by inserting a codicil in his will and forbidding her from marrying Will Ladislaw. After his death, Dorothea is torn between loyalty to his memory and her growing feelings for Will. So this is where she is caught up again between. She cannot do much about it. She also begins to discover her own moral clarity. There is again some kind of a self revelation that Eliot is trying to present here. Rather than continue in passive sorrow, Dorothea steps into public life. She helps people, she understands the reality of poverty, she starts gaining insight in how exactly a society functions, how people manage their day to day life, and she continues doing charity of this kind. And now here we come to the person, the love interest of Dorothea, that is Will. He too distances himself to preserve her reputation. Uh, and when they finally come together, it is not in a romantic heat, but in humility, out of mutual respect, out of shared values. So Dorothea's love for Will is not a replacement for Casaubon, but transformation of her earlier ideals. So, look how beautifully Eliot has presented um, the characters here, and especially uh, he is not fantasizing the idea of true love. Rather, he is trying to make the audience understand that there is something called respect, and it's higher than the element of love, and which evolves gradually in these two characters. At the end, when they meet, what they do is they become a team, they become a there is a partnership involved, something that Dorothea always had expected from Casaubon. And towards the end, with Will, um with a great team like Will, she finds her meaning or purpose for doing social good. And with extreme humility, both of them, um, they try to bring some kind of social evolution. Then, towards the last part of the novel, uh, there is towards the closure. It's there is a there is a quiet realism that Eliot wants to present. Lidget and Rosamond, they settle in a life of mediocrity. So he gives up on reformation. Lidget is done bringing his intellectual. He wants to save his marriage, so they move abroad. And but the worst part is he dies young, although he is respected, but he's not defeated. And then Dorothea and Will, they also marry despite the disinheritance. They live a life of modest but meaningful engagement. They work for social reformation, they support each other's ideas, and Dorothea's dreams do not come true in a grand way she once imagined, but she still finds meaning. She finds her inner life fulfillment of principles and actions. So, what Eliot reflects in all the sections is through the lines, the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. The effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive. For the growing good of the world is so often thanks to people who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. And in these lines lies the true heart of Middlemarch. So it is not a novel of heroes, but of ordinary people trying to do better in their lives, trying to bring some kind of evolution in the society, trying to do something good for people, trying to live well. And Eliot's web of lives are again replete with mistakes, longings, compromises, because moral epic of Victorian England, where personal development is inseparable from social reality, and idealism must reckon with complexity. This is what is the idea of Victorian England. You would can never develop yourself staying in isolation, or not accepting the social realities. So that is the idea of George Eliot in this novel. Uh, now, um, Eliot very actively resists the demand that the novels, or especially this novel Middlemarch, that it offers. It's a very neat plot. It's full of clear resolution. It is not a chain of episodes that the novel is presenting. It is not random. It is rather um, designed, mirroring the complexity of real social life, in which lives they intersect, and there are unpredictable situations, and there are unpredictable ways and meaning, and they often emerge retrospectively. um, uh, James Henry James, the critic, he really admired the novel Middlemarch, but he also recognized what he considered a fundamental tension in its construction. According to him, the novel seems at times too large and too diffuse, or too tangled in the web of its many characters and subplots, to produce the neat structural unity expected from great works of art. So that is where he has given a critic, uh, where it is essential to bring the social life into public forum through the work of art. But then when there are too many characters and all connected, tangled in the web, in the words of Henry James, that is what he critiqued there. So it could have been tightly structured, it could have been more coherent. So that is what Henry James talks about as a critic. But as you read the novel, and if you understand or analyze it critically, you would come to know Eliot's the his commitment towards realism, the philosophical base that signifies the commitment to realism, the belief in the significance of the choices, or the mundane details, or the quiet struggles that binds the novel. The novel structure must, in the words of Eliot, remain somewhat open ended. It is allowed to be messy, but it is required that it remains open ended. And this is important because it's important to reflect the psychological truths that the society is to offer. The tidy resolutions of fairy tales, or the comedy of manners here, unlike that Eliot realism, it resists closure. Now, um, Eliot's Middlemarch is from the 19th century, and it highlights how debates over content, or authorship, and ideology should have evolved. And we will also take an example of Henry James' ambivalent review in Galaxy. The Galaxy is his work of art, and it was written in 1873. It very famously captured the paradox at the heart of Middlemarch. There was just this sentence: "A treasure house of detail, but it is an indifferent whole." So James admires Eliot characters, and he believes that Eliot's characters are deeply human in the world that they have created, but he struggles with the novel's lack of formal unity. The multiplicity of stories or moral perspectives or thematic concerns, they sometimes might have a potential to threaten the audience mind. The sense of a coherent artistic structure, that is what James um, points out in the Eliot's character. Virginia Woolf's famous description towards Middlemarch begins with this quote: "One of the few English novels written for grown up people." It was written in 1919. And this is from where exactly there is a shift from a formal to ethical evaluation. Virginia Woolf gestured towards the maturity of Eliot's themes like marriage or compromise or vocation or the disappointment the characters have gotten in their life, the self deception, the argument that the novel tackles with the complex emotional and moral realities of adult life. Woolf writing actually made a shift from the very conventional to ethical evaluation. Woolf does not resolve the novel's contradiction, rather, she validates its depth, the psychological depth and moral seriousness. Although accused of being imperfect, but she comes with the idea that this novel has moral seriousness attached with the characters and the plot which was introduced. There were other critics also, for example, W.J. Harvey and Barbara Hardy, and they praised Eliot's narration, the interconnected characters, and they said that this novel is a hallmark of what we now call a classic realism. So they say we feel the pressure of an enormous number of beings, human beings, modifying the doctrines of the novelist as well as contributing to them. So, in their view, Middlemarch achieves a complex but cohesive moral and narrative design, and totally grounded in lived social experiences. uh, and gradually, by the end of 20th century, there were more critics like Terry Eagleton and J. Hillis Miller. They began to deconstruct the text. They challenged Eliot's authorial authority and narrative coherence. Even Eagleton highlights the tension between the ideals that Eliot presents. He presents the ideals like reasoning, progressing, empathy, compassion, and the ideological contradiction in the lines that is mentioned. The religion of humanity protects romantic values from excessive rationalism, but there is a discrepancy between what the novel claims and what it shows. So, Miller also argues that the metaphors of web and stream, these are the central images of unity, and they suggest a novel at war is with its own metaphors. So both these critics see Eliot not as confident in controlling the characters, but as struggling to impose coherence on the fundamentally fragmented world. There were feminist critics also. They have also added a lot to the gender dimension of the debate. There were early feminists who saw Middlemarch as something called patriarchal limitations, where female ambition is mediated through male agency. For example, Dorothea's reliance on Casaubon and later Will. And then later feminist readings, they interpret this not as complicity but as a subtle subversion. Eliot reveals how women are trapped in gendered social system, even if her characters do not escape it. So these are some of the critics. Um, George Eliot evokes the image of um, Saint Teresa of Avila in the prelude to align Dorothea as a character with tradition of spiritual hunger and moral ambition. Historically, Saint Teresa was a powerful reformer with her Catholic Church, a mystic and a founder of many convents, far from founders of nothing, as Eliot describes. Eliot selectively uses and reshapes the figure of Saint Teresa to reflect the circumscribed condition of 19th century women like Dorothea, whose aspirations struggle to find public realization in um, in a male dominated world. So, Eliot's narrative sets up the problem of a thwarted female ambition, symbolizing Dorothea's misplaced hopes in her husband, Casaubon. This is tied to a broader feminist reading, suggesting how patriarchal structures deny women autonomy and create agencies. So these are some of the thematic focus, the soul hunger of exceptional women, and how we picture Dorothea here. So this is the end of Unit 1, and let's go to Unit 2 now. Unit 2, the themes, characters, and techniques used in the novel. So we already consider George Eliot's Middlemarch as a work of art. And while we consider the novel as a work of art, it is essential to approach it through its interwoven themes, rather than seeking a rigid system of ideas or characters as personified abstractions. Eliot's genius lies in his ability to combine a deeper ethical vision with a realistic portrayal of human lives. The thematic structure of the novel, Middlemarch, operates more like a densely woven tapestry than a schematic diagram. Here in this situation, Barbara Hardy notes the characters in Middlemarch, they contribute to and simultaneously modify Eliot's moral insights, creating a dynamic interplay rather than a didactic message. So, here, one of the central themes of the novel is vocation. Vocation, a question of individual purpose and public contribution. So, this theme is most poignantly explored through the character Dorothea Brooke and also Tertius Lydgate. Both begin their narratives with high aspirations. Dorothea yearns for a spiritually fulfilling life of productivity, of usefulness, while Lydgate seeks to reform the field of medicine with new scientific principles. Their ambitions, however, are compromised by social constraints, by misguided choices, and personal limitations, and also having a better half who is not as worthy as they had initially thought of. Casaubon's failed intellectual ambition, he was ambitious, but he was not an intellect. He started with a project he with no directions. So that was a failed intellectual ambition that serves as a grim warning of the dangers of a vocation. You may have an ambition, but you may not have a purpose. That is what Eliot is trying to mention here. That is where you create dangers to vocation, devoid of vitality and connection. And there were other characters such as Bulstrode and Fairbrother. They further complicate this theme. Bulstrode disguises personal gain under religious and philanthropic appearances, and Fairbrother embodies the tensions between moral integrity and social compromise. So vocation can be one central theme of the novel. The next theme, which is closely related, is marriage and compatibility or incompatibility. Marriage here is not explored as a romantic ideal. Rather, marriage here is understood as a complex social structure, a contract that shapes, supports, or stifles personal growth. Eliot investigates how marriages are formed within a network of mutual dependence and economic necessity. Dorothea's marriage to Casaubon is a union of intellectual illusion and spiritual blindness. And Lydgate's marriage to Rosamond Vincy reveals how ambition can be derailed by vanity and misunderstanding. These relationships of these two pairs expose the limits of personal agency and critiques the illusion of autonomous choices. Even seemingly successful pairings are not free from the pressures of class, money, and gendered roles. Beyond marriage and compatibility as a theme, there is a third theme: wealth and material interests. These are the persistent forces, and they had been these two themes had been operating beneath the surface of moral decision making. And Eliot does not shy away from showcasing the often disillusioning realities of money's influence on personal and public life. There are characters who are known as Mary Garth and Salib Garth. They represent a more grounded ethic of work and frugality, though even their integrity is not immune to the influence of class and inheritance structures. Now, there is Dorothea's indifference towards Casaubon wealth, and this marks a moral high ground. But Eliot subtly implies that each such ideals are shaped by one's class background and personal circumstances. There is a question of social hierarchy, a question of class, rank, status, and all of these elements are intricately mapped into Middlemarch community. Uh, the romance between Dorothea and Will Ladislaw is initially forbidden, and it's not just because of money, but because of Will's ambitious, Will's social standing and his perceived impropriety. Uh, the guards, as the characters, though virtuous and respected, cannot compete in status with families like the Brooks and other families. So the question of social hierarchy had always been there. The class system, which was invented in Middlemarch, does not break through with sudden revolutions, but there is a constant pressure, there is a code of behavior, there is opportunity, there is inheritance, and the like as this theme. Now, in synthesizing these themes, Middlemarch emerges not simply as a novel but as an organic whole where individuals intersect with larger historical, moral, and intellectual forces. The narrative does not merely uh, focuses on focus on the personal growth, but investigates the conditions under which such growth is possible. George Eliot's mm, art lies in refusing to reduce the characters to illustrations of ideas. There is always a tension between individual aspirations and social constraint. And that is what the novel, in its profound moral and artistic depth, tries to provide the audience. The theme of new knowledge as another theme, particularly in the realm of medicine, is a critical battleground in the novel. There is Lidget's efforts, uh, who is trying to introduce something modern, something which is evidence based medical science, and he wants to include that or bring that into the conservative world of Middlemarch, but that is met with suspicion and resistance. And when he enters the town with this aspiration of bringing this scientific innovation or bringing a reformation into his profession or doing good for the public, uh, he eventually falls. And it's not only because of his personal misjudgments, but also his marriage to Rosamond. So, uh, Eliot tries to showcase new systems of thought and knowledge, and that they do not thrive in isolation. They must be contended with the power structures, the local customs, the tradition involved, the inertia that brings this tradition in the society. So these go hand in hand. That is what the theme of new knowledge tries to showcase. There is something, another theme called religion. There is another institution of a theme, religion, that the novel wants to showcase. Now this religion as a theme, it occupies a complex position in Eliot's novel. Despite Eliot's personal rebellion against Orthodox Christianity that shaped the early intellectual development, Middlemarch does not present theology as a central axis. Rather, it features a range of religious characters and perspectives, none of which are wholly endorsed nor condemned. So there are other characters like Cadwallader, Mr. Tyke, Mr. Fairbrother. They all represent different shades of Anglican belief, and in such a setting, religion is not merely doctrinal but deeply social, because even this emerges out of politics, even this emerges out of status and class and personal loyalties in a manner that mirrors broader questions of moral and communal authority. There is also an exploration of egotism as a theme, especially in its psychological form, uh, rather than purely moral sense. It adds yet another layer to Eliot's rich character study, and it is drawn from the vocabulary of Froude and Jung. Though Eliot predates them, the framework here is retroactively applied. Now, the audience can definitely interpret characters like Rosamund, Lidgett, and Dorothea, and they are not simply moral beings, but these are psychological actors who are shaped by strong internal vision of self. So, if you think of Rosamund, her vision of self is really high, and she considers her vanity, her beauty, the way she carries herself to be flamboyant. um, there is Dorothea, who believes her vision of the self is supposedly to be fulfilling her own finding of purpose in her life, and so on. So their egotism is not villainous, uh, but rather idealistic and often unconscious. Rosamund clings to her atheistic and social ambitions, uh, which is unable to which she finds unable to reconcile with her personal desires, with her husband's professional struggles. Lidgett, at the same time, holds his grand vision of scientific reformation. That is his ego, that he would want to bring something in something new. And like mentioned earlier, these are not villainous, but definitely flamboyant. And Dorothy's noble aspirations, so that also the practicalities of achieving her vision of goodness, so that also she initially fails to grasp the real nature. So there is a section in this unit which offers an opportunity for a reader response criticism, in especially in the way um, how interpretive theorists invite us to do, by questioning how meanings emerge from the interplay between text and reader rather than being passively received. So George Eliot's Middlemarch begins not only with Dorothea's story, but with a richly ionic, critically self aware a tone that frames the reader's response from the very first introduction. At the core of the book, the tension that we see or try to understand between Dorothea's idealism and the society that fails to accommodate it, and the way Eliot frames Dorothea as a modern day Saint Teresa who is full of noble impulses and desires to serve, but crucially, without the institutional or cultural framework in which such desires might be realized. So these uh, oh, rather than accepting it at the way it is, Eliot tries to put it in a place precisely to invite what the reader have to question to its premise. For example, does society really prevent good simply because one is a woman? And what kind of nearness counts as a life's fulfillment? Dorothea's reaches near through marriage and moral effort. Yet we are urged to interrogate whether those avenues are remotely sufficient for her inner ambitions. So Eliot's tone here is critical, even ionic, but not dismissive. She, Dorothea's aspirations are admired. At the same time, her aspirations are lamented because of the futility. And in such a world where things are not ready to accept, people are not ready to accept the kind of aspirations Dorothea has. The irony with which Eliot frames Dorothea's childlike ideas about marriage invites any modern reader to feel the dissonance between Dorothea's noble desires and the actual institution of marriage. So, this is Unit 2, and we come now to Unit 3. Before we start Unit 3, I think you can take a break here. This is 3:24. We exactly begin at 3:30. So you got a 6 minutes break today. Please take a break. We can meet in the next 6 minutes, 3:30. Okay, let's begin. This is Unit 3, and Unit 3 talks about the philosophical underpinnings. In philosophical underpinnings, there are few sections, and the first section starts with the lengthening shadow. The lengthening shadow, as a section, it casts illness and inevitable mortality. George Eliot guides us into one of the most morally charged segments of Middlemarch. The portion here tells mostly about a title, Waiting for Death. And this is not merely a literal description of characters nearing the end of life, but a psychological, emotional, and philosophical reckoning for those who are forced into proximity with dying minds and fading ambitions. We are talking about Casaubon, who becomes the central figure in this shadowed space. He is understood as someone who is associated with a scholarly project, but he is and no longer an example of erudition or knowledge or wisdom. Rather, a crumbling monument to a life of misapplied effort and mistaken assumptions. Eliot, through the characteristic psychological realism, does not permit the readers to dismiss Casaubon as just someone who is dry and ineffective pedant. Though earlier we may have laughed at a character like Casaubon, somebody who was a great dried pea rattle in the words mentioned in the novel, the depth of Eliot's characterization eventually pushes us into a space of ethical contemplation, asking us not only what kind of man Casaubon is, but whether such a life, which is so full of frustration or insecurity and loneliness, actually deserves either sympathy or disdainment. So, in the section, The Lengthening Shadow, Casaubon is not merely waiting to die, but he is also awaiting judgment, not from God, perhaps, but from Dorothea, his wife, from the world of knowledge to which he has given himself, and also from the readers who must now see him more fully. Dorothea's role in this evolving drama is complex. She begins with compassion, perhaps even with love, though what kind of love is itself a matter of interpretation. Barbara Hardy, the critic, argues that Dorothea, in the midst of her husband's illness, spontaneously chooses love, and certainly her actions, marked by tenderness and self effacement, suggest an immediate moral response that overrides reasoned disapproval. Yet one may just as convincingly argue that Dorothea chooses duty, not in the abstract sense she often invoked earlier in the novel, but as a lived ethical posture. There is a dignity in this duty. It comes not from naivety, but from a conscious setting aside of resentment or a suspension of criticism in the face of human frailty. Still, it would be simplistic to see this only as nobility. Dorothea's agitation, the sob in her voice, the desperate pleading with Lydgate, for example, tell me what I can do, the pleadings with Lydgate, speaks of her inner turmoil. The conflict is not resolved by a single moral act. She represses her negative sentiments so she can care for Casaubon. But repression is not erasure. The tension remains latent just beneath the surface. Dorothea is not deceived. She knows the futility of Casaubon's project, just as she senses increasingly the smallness of the world he has created around her. Yet, in this moment, Eliot portrays Dorothea not as someone who has yielded to despair, but as one who rises above it by refusing to make her husband's failures the ground for contempt. Casaubon's reaction to Dorothea's kindness only deepens the tragedy. He does not rise to meet her self sacrifice with gratitude or warmth. Instead, he withdraws into himself, refusing her offers of care, treating her tentative gestures with suspicion and silent resentment. His jealousy towards Will Ladislaw festers in silence, reveals not just his fear of betrayal, but the hollowness at the core of his identity. Casaubon is terrified not only for death, but of being seen, truly seen, for what he is, a man who has dedicated his life to a fruitless enterprise. Will Ladislaw, by contrast, represents all that Casaubon lacks: vitality, creativity, youth, and freedom. Casaubon suspects that Dorothea sees this too, and this suspicion isolates him further, calcifying his coldness into cruelty. This is basically a psychological drama, and the drama reaches its height in Casaubon's refusal to name what he fears. He cannot speak plainly of Will, cannot ask Dorothea directly for her loyalty, and thus resorts to the pettiness of the codicil, the infamous clause in his will that attempts to control her from beyond the grave. This act, meant to preserve his pride, is ultimately an admission of its failure. The scholar who once sought to define mythologies in himself, now mythic only in his own mind, holding fast to the illusion of order and authority, even as his body fails him and his mind recoils from the truth. And still, George Eliot does not wholly abandon him. In the lines, it is an uneasy lot at the best to be what we call highly taught and yet not to enjoy. There is an extension of a rare and complex empathy, and not an absolution, but a recognition of pain. Casaubon's tragedy is not that he is unloved, but that he is incapable of love, of surrendering his pride enough to meet Dorothea's honesty with honesty of his own. His fear of his own significance has made him brittle. Eliot allows us, all the readers, these audience, to see this brittleness not as weakness but as a terrible kind of suffering. His illness progresses, and Casaubon becomes more spectral than human. His physical decline, that tells about his intellectual erosion and also about the emotional authority. He is reduced to watching and waiting, unable to act meaningfully, neither in work nor his relationships. Eliot stages this as a philosophical reckoning. Casaubon, faced with the dark river brink, is an image that evokes the Greek myth of Charon and the passage into death, but the forms remain indistinctive. For Dorothea, the final chapters of her life with Casaubon do not clarify so much as they intensify her internal questioning. She turns from asking what she can do for him to wondering why he treats her with such coldness. What have I done, and what am I, that he should treat me so? Here, the old Dorothea, the one who always saw herself as the subject of moral growth, who interrogated her actions with zeal, is joined by a new awareness that even the best intentions, the noblest desires, may not redeem a relationship founded on misjudgment. In this juxtaposition between Casaubon and Will, Eliot presents not merely a contrast of personalities, but also the modes of being. Casaubon is wrapped in ego and intellectual anxiety. He is rigid and self defensive, whereas Will is fluid, expressive, unconcerned with reputation. Casaubon needs Dorothea to confirm his grandeur, but Will is drawn to her because she questions grandeur itself. Casaubon is a study in egotism, in the sense that he makes himself the measure of all meaning, and in doing so, shuts himself off from life. Will, for all his flaws, lives with others and not over them. And Dorothea, caught between these two men, is slowly learning to discern the difference between submission to greatness and recognition of goodness. Thus, this section is not merely a chronicle of decay, but a liminal space where transformations begin to take root. Casaubon does not change, he dies unchanged, but Dorothea does. Her compassion, though muted by rejection, becomes the seed of her later strength. Her pain does not shrink, it matures her. And George Eliot allows us to feel sorrow for the man, Casaubon, and might also want us to recoil from the one he became. The next section is about the hidden subject, the section of Middlemarch, the hidden subject, where George Eliot handles the hidden, socially censored theme of sexuality, especially female sexual awakening and repression, and it is worth examining closely. This subject has never explicitly mentioned but deeply embedded in the emotional undercurrents of the narrative, and it gains significance in the unhappy marriage of Dorothea and Casaubon, and the unspoken yet palpable attraction between Dorothea and Will Ladislaw. The Victorian taboo on open discussions of sexuality meant that authors like Eliot had to resort to gestures or indirect suggestions and symbolic substitution to approach the subject. Dorothea's disillusionment during her wedding and her subsequent emotional coolness are not simply the byproducts of mismatched intellects, and they also gesture towards a marriage and an unconsummated in both mind and body. Casaubon's distaste for touch, his sterility, not just of imagination, but also of sensual presence, frames him as a figure of lifeless duty and cerebral dryness. This is not insignificant that his scholarly obsession, the project he was working for, the key to all mythologies, is sterile in another sense. It's a text without generative power, a pursuit that produces no offspring, literal and intellectual. However, in contrast, Will Ladislaw is drawn with a vitality of sense and soul. His tank is filled with color, sound, texture, and feeling. While these are ostensibly used in discussions of art and aesthetics, their subtext is unmistakable. They are bodily, sensuous modes of being. This become more powerful given the repression all around. Eliot cannot have Dorothea or any of her characters speak directly of carnal longing, but the there is definitely the the idea is infused in their silences, their reactions, their physical unease with a suggestive tension. The fact that Will and not Casaubon evokes Dorothea's animation, her responsiveness, her inner trembling is telling. Eliot uses his warmth as a foil to Casaubon's chill. Will speaks to the part of Dorothea that has been denied not only the right to meaningful intellectual partnership, but also to physical and emotional fulfillment. So there is a repression, uh, the sexuality part is repressed, and this is a broader part into the philosophical underpinning in the novel. Still, Middlemarch is a novel about transformation. Dorothea's transformation is ongoing. She is not yet free, and Casaubon still exerts his will even as his body declines. And Will's danger lies not in his intentions, but in his capacity to awaken something in Dorothea that Casaubon has never touched and cannot comprehend. Running parallel to this emotional psychology drama, in the death of another character, Peter Featherstone, a man who attempts to control the world from his deathbed. His rattling of keys, his manipulative last minute offers to marry Garth, his attempt to buy loyalty and obedience, these mirrors Casaubon's own attempts to command Dorothea's future. Featherstone, however, is more grotesque, more openly comic in his characteristics features. Yet, even here, Eliot draws the audience towards a serious reflection on moral autonomy, class, and integrity. Marigoth stands in direct contrast to both Featherstone and Casaubon, not because she is powerful, but because she is resolute in her values, refusing to sell her conscience even for the good of the man she loves. So, the three love problems that emerge after the deaths of Featherstone and Casaubon are shaped by the recognition of the enduring presence of the dead. Both men attempt to reach beyond the grave through legal and emotional constraint. Eliot, however, is far more interested in showing how the living transcend the dead, how the vitality of affection, choice, and ethical commitment outlasts the coercions of ego and control. So, uh, the engagement between Lydgate and Rosamond that emerges not out of mutual understanding or shared values, but from a moment of calculated emotional vulnerability, possibly sincere or staged. The ambiguity surrounding Rosamond's naturality is crucial. She is genuinely hurt, whether she is genuinely hurt or she is weaponizing her femininity in accordance with what Victorian culture prescribes as attractive to men, only is known best to the character herself. Eliot does not resolve the ambiguity and that interdependency in her point that embodies Rosamond to perform codes of her time. Codes, for example, which encourage women to mask agency under gentleness and to convert emotional display into power. She is, in a sense, auditioning for the role of wife, one which her social class has trained her to play flawlessly. Her tears, they shake flirtation into love, but whether this love has substance is left in question. From a feminist perspective, uh, the the context is a case of male gaze as theorized by Laura Mowley and other critics. The act of looking is not passive, but a form of appropriation. Lydgate is, while viewing Rosamond's tearful delicacy, does not see her fully as a person, but as a symbolic object of need, evoking the protective instincts and desire. Rosamond's role is also tied to class aspiration. uh, the family with their new money and social ambition rely on marriage as currency. Rosamond's marriage to a man like Lydgate, who is well educated, respected, and connected, represents a strategic elevation. So Eliot critiques this softly but pointedly, very sharply. The satire is gentle, but the consequences are not. Lydgate learns too later in the story, and his vision of marriage and Rosamond's by that time or since the beginning were never aligned. So this is unit 3, philosophical underpinnings. We go to unit 4, Eliot's perspective. Eliot's perspective and the section Eliot's preferences for determinism, the belief that human behavior is shaped by structural and historical forces rather than free will, possess interpretive challenges when analyzing her characters' inner lives. In Middlemarch, characters often believe they are making free choices. Yet, Eliot subtly shows how their options are limited by class, gender, or money and social expectation. And this tension is central to the understanding of novel. Determinism in Eliot's fiction reveals how individuals' life are deeply conditioned by social structure, and this showcases the conflicts in the ideology, even when they appear to be acting freely. Uh, Althusser's concept of ideology that defines the imagery relationship of individuals to their real conditions of existence. And this means people are often unaware of how social systems shape their beliefs, desires, and decisions. For example, Rosamund may think she's choosing love freely, but she's actually reproducing class ambitions. And in case of Dorothea, she may believe she's pursuing noble ideas, but she's still subject to gendered social constraints. So Eliot's character often misrecognize, according to the concept of ideology by Althusser, their ideological positioning. They think they are autonomous when actually they are not. Eagleton's essay, George Eliot, Ideology and Literary Form, that is reference to show how Middlemarch as a novel embodies ideological contradictions. And the form here of the novel itself reflects tensions between competing worldviews, between individualism and social conformity, emotion and rationalism, idealism and realism. So there is a presentation of Victorian capitalism as a context where Eliot sets the novel, where corporate capitalism and its institutions, for example, the medical profession, the land ownership, marriage markets, and political reform, all these dominate. The social new order demands conformity and disciplines individuality. The novel dramatizes a conflict between two ideologies: romantic individual associated with the free spirit, emotional spontaneity, and personal authenticity, for example, in the character feature of Will Ladislaw, and corporate ideology, aligning with science, rational planning, social order, and hierarchy, as seen in Lydgate's scientific career or Casaubon's scholarly control. Eliot does not realize one over the other that he's actually idealizing and also trying to reconciling them, showcasing how pure individualism must submit to rational structures if it is to avoid chaos. There are the higher modes of ideology that Eliot is said to favor, and one of them is fewer Bashian humanism, which emphasizes on compassion, empathy, reasoning, and moral development. And there is scientific rationalism that focuses on objective knowledge and societal progress. And both the attempts to replace romantic emotionalism with measured, ethical, and social responsible behavior, Eliot champions moral realism. And there is a worldview that sees individuals as part of a wider network of responsibilities shaped by forces beyond their control. Eliot's ideological project in Middlemarch is neither romantic escapism nor cold rationalism. Instead, there is a construction of a fictional world where freedom is constrained but not absent, where individuals must negotiate their desires within a social matrix that is historical, material, and ideological. Eliot wants her readers, Eliot wants the readers to recognize that meaningful reform, personal or political, and she also requires both idealism and structural awareness. True progress lies in acting ethically within systems and not in rebellion against them. The conflict between corporate law and individual impulse has been one of the central ideological struggles in George Eliot's Middlemarch. And nowhere is this tension more vividly dramatized than in the relationship between Dorothea Brooke and Casaubon, Edward Casaubon. The title Dead Hand is progressively suggesting and evoking imagery of oppressive spectral authority, an external force from the past that continues to exert control over the present. This dead hand, as the title suggests, is more than metaphorical. It stands for both the constraining power of institutions, such as marriage and inheritance, and for the ideological remnants of a patriarchal nationalist worldview that stifles individual desire and autonomy. At one point of the novel, Dorothea faces two psychological and moral dilemmas: whether to submit entirely to Casaubon's command, his request for a blank, unconditional promise of obedience, and whether she can continue to believe in a symbolic and moral value of his intellectual project. Dorothea feels that she is going to say yes to her own doom, revealing how deeply she recognizes the potential self annihilation inherent in yielding to Casaubon's authoritarian will. This moment encapsulates the ideological pressure she feels to conform to the Victorian ideal of the dutiful wife, even as her intuitive, romantic spirit resists it. There is an internal struggle. Eliot probes the limit of individual agency within the rigid social structures that define womanhood, marriage, and knowledge itself in her time. Casaubon's death soon after this moment does not resolve the conflict, but rather intensifies it through the will, which contains the codicil that forbids Dorothea from marrying Will Ladislaw, lest she lose her inheritance. This clause functions as a final assertion of patriarchal power from the deathbed. What had been a private emotion, Dorothea's growing affection for Will, is now transformed into a matter of public scandal. A deeply personal choice is dragged into the arena of legal and moral judgment. It is turning the innocence into humiliation. And in this, the text, as you will read, enacts the broader conflict between romantic individualism, that are freedom, love, subjective experience, etc., and the higher corporate ideological modes, that is duty, law, social reputation, etc., that underpins Victorian society. The institution of marriage as a space of emotional intimacy is revealed instead as a domain of power, surveillance, and control. So, we'll take you to the last unit now, unit 5. Unit 5 is the finale. At the end of Middlemarch, George Eliot weaves through together multiple narrative threads: personal, social, and political, by bringing all the three threads into alignment with the idea of reform. This concept functions not only as a historical and political reference, but also as a broader metaphor for change, growth, and moral progress in both individuals and society. Eliot is acutely aware of the momentous political debates, particularly the passing of the first Reform Bill in 1832. And in this context, within the novel's conclusion, to underscore the social transformations taking place in the early 19th century England. The first Reform Bill addressed deeply entrenched inequalities in political representations. At the time, many of the industrial cities, such as Birmingham and Manchester, had no representation in parliament, despite their growing population and economic power. Conversely, small and sometimes nearly uninhabited rural districts, known as rotten boroughs, retain disappropriate influence and allowed wealthy landowners to effectively control elections. This imbalance made the political system seem archaic and unjust to reform minded individuals. The first reform bill, first introduced to the House of Commons in March and passed into law in 1832, was a crucial step towards a more representative parliamentary system, though it was far from revolutionary in scope. The reform debate, which is presented in the novel Middlemarch, is mirrored in the subplot involving Mr. Brooke and Will Ladislaw. Mr. Brooke's shallow attempt to enter politics, prompted more by vanity than conviction, ultimately collapses under the pressure of public ridicule and his own incompetence. Through him, Eliot critiques the landed gentry's ineffectual and outdated grasp of political responsibility. Brooke's failure to become a true reformer shows the limits of aristocratic involvement in modern governance. In contrast, Will Ladislaw, a character who represents energy, idealism, and a cosmopolitan outlook, emerges as a figure who most fully embraces the spirit of reform. Though Will is not a radical in a revolutionary sense, his integrity, rejection of the inherited wealth, and commitment to public service align him with the future oriented values of the reform movement. At the end of the novel, as in how you read, Ladislaw marries Dorothea and enters public life, becoming a politician devoted to liberal causes. His union with Dorothea, a woman of moral depth and intellectual ambition, symbolizes ethical conviction and progressive social ideals. The marriage transcends conventional norms of class and inheritance. Just give me a second. So, the marriage between the two transcends the traditional norms of the class and inheritance, and this suggests a vision of partnership based on mutual respect and shared ideals. Another layer to the novel's thematic interest in reform. Eliot's description of their future, though provides no detailing affirms their usefulness in the world, enduring nature of their influence. The novel's conclusion reinforces the reformist ethos in several ways. On the personal level, characters like Dorothea and Will, transformed by love, loss, and moral struggle into better, more socially engaged individuals. And on the societal level, Eliot uses the backdrop of parliamentary reform to emphasize the importance of fairness, inclusiveness, and merit over tradition and privilege. The narrative strands that once seemed disparate, the spiritual longing of Dorothea, the professional ambitions of Lydgate, the political idealism of Ladislaw, and the moral collapse of Bulstrode, all converge in a broader context of social reform. Ultimately, Eliot's vision of reform is tempered but hopeful. There is no endorsement of revolution or radical upheaval. Rather, there is a belief in gradual progress driven by personal integrity and collective responsibility. The characters, like the society they inhabit, are capable of change, although not perfect or heroic, but moving towards betterment in the quietest possible manner that history often records too faintly. Middlemarch becomes not only a portrait of particular time, but also a philosophical statement on the slow, cumulative nature of real reform. Lydgate's plea to Bulstrode for financial help marks the critical turning point in both his personal arc and the novel's wider ideological landscape. His fall from an ambitious reformer in the medical field to a man compromised by debt and dependency on dubious benefactors reveals how intertwined reform, money, and moral compromise can be. Middlemarch does not simply romanticize reform as a noble endeavor, it interrogates the structural obstacles, class rigidity, professional jealousy, financial limitations, all of which impede real change. Lydgate had arrived in Middlemarch with high ideals, drawn from advanced training in Paris, and committed to bringing scientific discipline and institutional structure to English medical practice. The proposed hospital becomes a symbolic ground for this reform, not just as a physical structure, but as a modern vision for how knowledge and public service might collaborate for collective well being. However, townspeople's resistance, driven by habit, ignorance, and class suspicion, mirrors the broader reluctance to accept new forms of social and professional organization. Money proves the ultimate counterforce. Lydgate's loftily aspires, steadily undermined by the marriage to Rosamond, exemplifies the domestic ideal with no sense of economic restraints. Her upbringing in conventional accomplishments rather than practical skills or shared purpose leads her to misunderstand and undermine Lydgate's goals. Eliot uses their deteriorating relationship to critique the hollow refinement promoted in women's education, a key point in the women question discourse. Rosamond's financial demands and obsession with status gradually drive Lydgate into the arms of the very system he sought to change, culminating in his reluctance compromises with Bulstrode. Dorothea's reformist vision is also hampered by practical and social constraints. It ends on a note of moral clarity. Her longing to use her wealth not for personal gain but for meaningful social contribution, reveals a secularized, pragmatic idealism. No longer aspiring to sainthood like her early comparison to Saint Teresa, she now envisions modest yet impactful change within her means, within reality. The next section under the last unit is figurality. Figurality in Middlemarch is one of George Eliot's most powerful narrative strategies, shaping the novel's aesthetic, philosophical, and sociological dimensions. The use of metaphor is not decorative or incidental, it is deeply embedded in the structure and meaning of the novel, allowing Eliot to convey the complexity of human relationships, the interdependence of individual and society, and the limitations of perception and moral judgment. One of the most dominant metaphors in Middlemarch is that of the web, which recurs in multiple contexts: social, romantic, scientific, and psychological. As an image, the web embodies delicacy and interconnectedness. A web is composed of fragile threads that, while appearing interdependent, are in fact inextricably connected. This metaphor allows Eliot to illustrate how the actions of a single character can reverberate through the entire fabric of Middlemarch society. The lives of characters are not lived in isolation, they are constantly influencing, obstructing, and supporting each other in ways that often go unacknowledged by the characters themselves, but are made visible to the readers through Eliot's omniscient narration. Eliot uses this web imagery with precision. For instance, Lidgett's entanglement in Middlemarch narrow provincial expectations is described in terms of hampering threads. His marriage to Rosamond, who spins her own web of romance and illusions, further traps him. Rosamond's little future with Lidgett at its center is spun out like a spider weaving its trap, a metaphor that is both poetic and critical. In Dorothea's case, the metaphor becomes more psychological and existential. She is caught in a labyrinthine web of societal norms and gender roles that offer no clear path towards her expansive vision of moral action. Her early ambitions to live like Saint Teresa is thwarted by a maze of petty courses, suggesting the way in which grand ideals often become diluted and redirected by everyday limitations. The vision in Middlemarch is not purely redemptive, it is also deeply limited. Characters frequently misperceive each other and also themselves, acting on assumptions rather than truths. Casaubon sees Dorothea as a disciple, not a partner. Rosamond sees Lydgate as a social stepping stone, not as a man with ambitions beyond the drawing room. These misperceptions are described through metaphors of opacity, blindness, blurred vision, indicating the fragile and partial nature of human understanding. There is an incorporation of technical vocabulary of science. Eliot incorporates all these terms in the novel, especially through Lydgate's character, to enrich the metaphoric range. Lydgate's medical research into the primitive tissue is described in terms that echo the vivid structure of society, creating a parallel between biological and social systems. The failure of Lydgate's ideals, his slow descent into compromise and disillusionment, is depicted through metaphors drawn from biology. His life with Rosamond becomes a struggle for survival in an alien environment. At one point, he is likened to a jellyfish, passive, structureless creature that gets melted without knowing it. Rosamund, by contrast, is described as a torpedo, an electric ray fish whose touch paralyzes. Such metaphors are richly suggestive. They highlight Lidget's growing helplessness, Rosamund's quiet destructiveness, and the failure of rational ideals when confronted with emotional and social realities. There is a sense of water imagery, and which is again another significant figure in Eliot's landscape. Water flows, connects, and reshapes. And now, this symbolizes both the passage of time, the shifting nature of human desire and destinies. It can be gentle like a stream or overwhelming like a flood. So these are some of the multiple metaphorical strands. Uh, the um, um, all these figures in Middlemarch, they operate as on several different levels, and it creates richly textured language. It deepens the vision of the visualization power of the audience. It deepens characterization. It draws thematic parallels across scientific, romantic, and social spheres. It bridges the personal with the historical, and through these metaphors, Eliot manages to unify the sprawling complexity of the novel into a vision that is both realistic and deeply symbolic. The last section here serves as a grand resolution, which is open, which is reflective, that gestures towards continuity rather than closure. It projects the characters, especially Dorothea, into a future shaped by modest but meaningful contributions. And the prelude and the final uh, form a structural and thematic frame for the novel. The prelude invokes Saint Teresa as a symbol of a spiritual and moral striving that fails to find a proper field of action. By ending on Thorosia's subsumed life, Eliot seems to echo this disappointment, but the tone is more melancholic than cynical and ultimately more accepting. So rather than mocking Dorothea, Eliot invites the readers to question the myth of heroic individual. The age of saints and founders has passed. What remains is the complex web of social interdependence, within which any meaningful action must be modest, should be compromised, and sometimes should often be invisible. So this reflects the historical reality of the reform era, and there is a dynamism in the text. The reading is often more structured given the number of characters. And um, there is a redefinition form of heroism, which is rooted in empathy, support, and moral insight. And the vision here, Eliot's vision, um, the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. This line encapsulates the humility, realism, and quiet power of the novel's closing note. So we are done with Unit 5 and also the block. This is block 5, end of block 5. And tomorrow we begin with block 6, the heart of darkness. And probably Saturday, Sunday is an off. So we are done with block 6 by tomorrow, and then remaining, there are 3 more blocks to go. That will be in the next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Sanjeev. Sanjeev, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr.
Can you hear
Sanjeev, you
me?
saying
Yeah,
something?
yeah. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the class and your time. I just wanted to ask you a question, just to as a guidance, some pointers, like on the question, explain how George Eliot engages with a woman question in Middle March. This is an
Yes.
assignment question. So
Yes.
basically, if there are some pointers which you could give based on what we went through today.
Yeah, definitely. Can you please repeat the question?
Uh, Explain how George Eliot engages with the woman question. The woman
Women
question,
question.
yeah, the woman question in Middlemarch.
Okay, okay. If I'm not wrong, perhaps yes, women question. Yes, sir, I got it.
Yeah.
So mm, basically, Eliot's Middlemarch here it offers a very layered meditation on the women question within the context of the mid 19th century English society. Now, if we consider the character of Dorothea Brooke, who is the novel's central figure, she serves as the primary site through which Eliot explores both limitations placed upon women and the possibilities of inner growth and intellectual self realization despite several societal constraints. Now, her movement from youthful idealism to mature self awareness is not merely a narration of personal development, but it forms as an allegorical representation of the broader feminine struggle. So, what I would suggest you here in order to write this answer, if you're asking me for an assignment purpose, you can uh, characterize Dorothea Brooke from Eliot's perspective and also from the perspective of the audience. You can also compare her character from Rosamund's point of view also, and there are few other sections in the book you will come to read. The widow and the wife, there is another section in the book. Okay, so where Dorothea is self-reflective and lamenting, and there are few lines there, so you can just take those lines and you can think of analyzing that. And basically it's mostly about Dorothea.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. That
yeah,
was
yeah.
quite informative.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. Yeah.
Thank
Acha,
you.
ma'am, I have question, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Dhananjay, yes please.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, in this unit, MEG-3 British novel. Okay, there are nine block, ma'am, right? Nine block.
Yes, yes, continue please.
So, ma'am, my question is that, so, ma'am, block five already you discussed, and block one already you discussed, I think. So, block two, three, four also important, ma'am.
All the blocks had been discussed. Every
Oh,
day we are discussing each blocks.
all the block you discussed, right?
Yes, yes.
Actually, ma'am, the books I got, okay, the books I got from the post office, and what you are teaching, actually, it is not math, ma'am. Actually, there is so many writings in the books, and I'm just listening. I did not math here.
The fact here is that I'm not reading a
Yes.
book, so that's the reason why it's not matching, isn't it? Had I
Uh,
been reading what the books you are catching and what I'll be reading, definitely they will have a good match. So basically, I'm not reading the book.
yeah, yeah. So, ma'am, actually, there's many writings here. Okay, actually, there are many facts in this book. So, how can we match this, ma'am? What you teaching and what you read in the book?
So you have to be very comprehensively dealing with each of the books. That's the
Oh, that's
reason why there are blocks which are already provided through PDFs. Then you say that you have received some books from the post office.
yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah,
you
yes.
have the recorded sessions, and for your own personal learning, I have always requested my audience to hold a notebook and a pen, so you
Yeah,
can listen to it and you can quickly write it down. So that will
yes,
help
ma'am.
you get deeper into the text that you are reading. So
Yes, yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Actually, ma'am,
okay.
one question, ma'am. Actually, from tomorrow, ma'am, if you open the video and teach us, I think it is better for us, ma'am.
I restrained that, Mr. Dhananjay. Uh,
Yes.
so I hope that is understood, and I restrain that. I generally do not want to come to the venue, so that is a personal choice.
Okay, okay. It is
Thank you
just
so
my
much.
social, ma'am. If you open the video, it's good for us.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
ma'am.
you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, Shazir Yusuf, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
ma'am, this is Sajiv's question only. Actually, in our five units, there are questions mentioned in it. In the fourth unit, there is a question, same question which Sajiv asked, the woman question. Right? It is mentioned that George Eliot's response to the issues raised by the women's question. In the last June 2024 questions, the same question is being asked in the exam. How
Okay,
does George Eliot engage with the woman question in the middle March? So my
okay,
question is whether the questions mentioned in the units, all the units, will it be asked in the exam or in other thing also will?
Should we send
Uh,
mail?
so that regarding the question, continuation of the questions, whether it is repeated or not, mm, what I
No,
can
ma'am.
say.
No, it is
Hmm,
not a repetition.
hmm.
Whatever the questions mentioned in these units will be asked in the exam, or other than that also we can come. Because
Uh,
the
hmm.
similarity, similar question in the unit 4 came in the last June 2024 exam. So that
Okay.
is why my question.
Okay, okay. Mr. Sajid, actually, I actually have no idea who, makes the set of questions. So, and what are the strategies they implement to set the questions. So, basically, I'm not very clear about the question pattern and whether or not, who sets it. So, I'll not be able to answer this question. I may not be the right person to answer this question.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
We could receive textbook. What is
Yes,
that?
Lakshmi Shuris was saying something. Mr. Dhananjay, would you like
I
to please mute yourself?
Oh, acha, acha. Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, Lakshmi, please.
ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, please. Yes.
Hi, ma'am. I wanted to know how should we go about writing criticisms to these novels? Should we stick to what the famous critics have said, or should is it okay if we add our personal opinions
Uh,
too?
yeah, Lakshmi. Yeah, I think we discussed this question yesterday. It's always good, no, if you have a variety of writers in your mind. If there are variety of critics, you are already reading from your own end, and you find that there are so many things. Okay, I can do one thing. How many of you follow ResearchGate? How many of you follow ResearchGate? How many of you have ideas on ResearchGate?
No, we don't. I don't have any idea.
No
Okay,
idea,
okay.
ma'am. Will you
No
explain?
idea, most of you. Okay, okay. Look, this is basically, there is this, about ResearchGate. Amit says, okay, good. So ResearchGate is one platform where probably you might find even a varied number of critics from various parts of the world, and how they are giving critics to, the writings and other things which are available. So what I can suggest you is, if you really want to make it your point really very deep and comprehensive, so you have to do some research, and you can always follow ResearchGate. Besides what is already given in the PDF materials in your eGAN course, or maybe if any you are following any books beyond that, you can also refer to ResearchGate, and you can just click the name of the novel you are mentioning, and what critics have mentioned about this particular novel, so you can collect information from there too. So this is what I can suggest.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. This actually, I was just searching Middlemarch here.
Hmm.
There is a variety of, I mean, lots of options have popped up in
Absolutely, sir.
ResearchGate. Yeah, it's really
Absolutely.
really good. Yeah,
Really good. Yeah, because
yeah.
literature, like I said, no, literature is something you would really want to get deeper into. Superfluous studying, surface level studying is absolutely not going to give you any determination of what exactly you're going to do. You'll just be having a plain degree. But if you really want to have your base really strong, please do research from your own end. and please come up with more write-ups, and that is always being encouraged and acknowledged.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
And ma'am, one thing, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr.
Uh,
Dhananjay,
yeah, yeah.
let me please answer the questions to Ragamalika, because they have raised hands. Okay, there are other people
Okay.
also. I'll come back to you. Yeah, Malini is saying something.
Yes, just a quick one. In continuation of Sajid's question about the women's question, we also, as part of the poetry unit in this, maybe you're not familiar, we're doing Sylvia Plath, which is very relevant to the women's question. So my question is, there is no harm in comparing a poetic study. It's the same age as well, the date-wise, to Eliot, is there? Because it's the same, the topic discussed is about women's emancipation and the struggles of women in that society.
Correct, correct. Absolutely.
Would that be okay?
There is no, yeah, yeah,
There
yeah,
is no
absolutely.
restriction because it's the
There is
same
no restriction.
syllabus.
No, there is no restriction, because it only adds in even deeper to what value you are already contributing. So anyway, you're not writing anything wrong. Rather, you are expanding your sense of writing. So that is what is required. Whether it is a purpose for assignment or examination, or even your teaching, you can give hundreds and thousands of examples regarding one concept from various contexts. So nothing like it, ma'am. Please go ahead for that.
Thank you.
It
Thank
should
you.
not be. It should not be limited to the 19th century only, or we can contemplate this.
Depends on how you write, sir. For example, if the question is especially talking about 19th century, so please mention 19th century. But if you have something you would want to refer to 17th or 18th century, this you can write down in a sentence like, although this is not from the 19th century, but an 18th century novel or a poetry also speaks the same thing. So then you can conclude your own ideas on like how the same idea has been continuing or progressing since then to now. So depends on how you write, sir. You have to convince the writer through your words.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Ragamalika has a question.
Ma'am, I have a personal question that my books are not, I didn't get my books till now. So, what should I do
Book.
next?
Okay. Somebody just mentioned they have received books. Would you like to? And I think you have created your own WhatsApp group also. Would you like to just connect to them? Because the technicality part, I'm not very sure of how and who is actually responsible to share books. The only thing is which is available is right now is the materials, and it is viewed worldwide. But regarding books, I'm not really very sure about it.
Okay, ma'am. If anybody is there who got the books, can you please contact me?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you, Ragmalika. Yes, Laila KP is saying something.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
I would like to do CBT exam.
CBT exam.
Uh, you know,
Okay. Okay.
from where I get the model question paper.
Regarding, okay, fine.
Mm.
Only office can tell you this, Laila. I'm so
Oh,
sorry. Yeah, regarding examination, this and that, I am not the right person. You should be asking. So I'm so sorry for that. I'm not being able to answer this.
okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So we do not have much questions left. So uh, we stop here, and tomorrow we meet again with the next block. And yeah, thank you all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much. Same
Thank
to
you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am, please one thing.
Yes, Mr. Dhananjay, please tell me.
Ma'am, actually, when to submit the assignment, ma'am?
Mr. Dhananjay, I have no idea regarding where to submit. I'm sure you might have all have the accounts.
Date, please, date.
Date is September 30th. Date is
30?
September 30th. September 30th.
38 September. 38. Sorry,
30th.
ma'am.
30th September.
30 September, no? And
No,
ma'am,
it's
how many
30th.
words you have to? Ma'am, how many words you have to write for one question? one questions for how many words minimum, ma'am?
Regarding assignments and the word limit,
Yeah,
I am not very sure about it.
I'm not sure, no?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.